It's the most notorious prison in the world, a state of its own, an extrajudicial enclave designed and commissioned by the Bush administration as a holding ground for the hundreds picked up in the battlefield that is the global war on terror. As the Bush administration ends its 10-year reign at the White House, I had a chance to visit Guantanamo Bay, a place that has become symbolic of the Bush presidency and with a legacy which will continue to dog the new administration. Shortly before the invasion of Afghanistan, I was sent by express newspapers to Pakistan, where more than 3,000 of the world's media had assembled as the war of words escalated between the Taliban and Washington. Impatient and tired of government press releases, I decided to go into Afghanistan wearing the all-enveloping burqa, to talk to ordinary Afghan people about their hopes and fears. Just days later, I was captured by the Taliban. News of my detention spread across the world, and I was accused of being a US spy. Stories of Taliban brutality were well documented, and here I was, inside a prison, belonging to what George W. Bush described as the most evil, brutal regime in the world. Personally, I went through a transformation. I guess living with the fact that you think you're going to die. And that faced me every day for 10 days. That turned me into, I think, a stronger person. I guess my time in Afghanistan, the whole 10 days in captivity, was a life-changing experience, but it also focused me very much on imprisonment and being in detention. When the news of Guantanamo unfolded, I, like many other people, were horrified. In 2007, I requested permission from the Pentagon to visit Guantanamo. Nearly a whole year later, I made my way to Miami, just a few hours from Cuba. As a fierce critic of America's war on terror, I was astonished to get the go-ahead. I have a lot of different mixed emotions going on. As a professional journalist, I want to be impartial, and we're told to be impartial. Although having said that, I had a recent conversation with Robert Fisk. He said, we can no longer remain sitting on the fence. We have to take a side with the victim, and we can no longer remain impartial. I have this battle going on inside. Yes, I do want to be impartial, but I know a lot of these men, their families, by background, by name, they're more than just numbers. Although my personal experience of captivity lasted only 10 days, I also know what the experience is like to lose your liberty, to lose control, to have to submit to the will of your captors. Our flight to Cuba took 3 hours, prolonged only by Castro's no-fly zone, which prohibits a more direct route. We were joined by civilian contractors and 3 other journalists. Eventually, the base emerged through the Cuban haze, but only when we touched down did I dare believe that this assignment was really going to happen. On arrival, we are soon instructed to turn off cameras. We were now in the hands of the US military, who would run our lives for the next 4 days. The Castro government considers the US presence in Guantanamo to be illegal, arguing that the Cuban-American Treaty of 1902 violates international law. But the American presence here is on an astonishing scale and has used the stretch of coastline as a naval base for more than 100 years. It is inhabited by a military and civilian population, which ensures the smooth running of this strategic operation. Inside the residential areas, it's as if you were in an ordinary American suburb. Only recently has Guantanamo been propelled back into the headlines as a controversial key element in US foreign policy.
The real problem is not Guantanamo Bay. The problem is that, to a large extent, we are in unexplored territory with this unconventional and complex struggle against extremism. Traditional doctrines covering criminals and military prisoners do not apply well enough. As the President has said, we are always looking for ways to improve our procedures. And of course, we have been looking for better suggestions as to how to manage detainees who pose a lethal threat to the civilized world.
The conditions under which detainees are being held are clean and humane and follow the spirit of Geneva Convention. The closing of Guantanamo could make the war on terrorism more difficult and ultimately more dangerous for our citizens.
We've had a briefing over breakfast, and we've been told what we can't do, where we can't go, what we can't shoot. It's really quite frustrating. We've also been told about the detainees in the camp who are dangerous, Al-Qaeda, Bin Laden's bodyguards. And this is one of the reasons, I think, for the tight security. But I have to say, I've been to Iraq, during Saddam, Iran, Afghanistan, quite a few sensitive countries, Saudi, and it's never been anything like this. We're surrounded by minders.
It's all right, I'm not getting anything, I promise.
Okay, I say making sure that nothing past this.
Can you just clarify for me exactly what the rules are?
It was becoming evident that any ideas we may have had about hard-edged journalism or creative filmmaking were looking increasingly ambitious. Our 7-strong media team was soon joined by a man called Gary, who would follow and scrutinise our every move. Gary, who insisted on being filmed from the neck down, explained the rules.
You can't have multiple towers. You can't have unoccupied guard towers. Okay, you can't show any of the guards' faces. If you've got some of the people that are part of the media tour, and you ask them if we can have your face in there and use your name, and a lot of times some of them say okay, some of them don't want that. So be aware of that.
We're about to go into the library, the first facility that they're going to show us inside the actual camp. So let's find out what the detainees read.
Unlike most libraries, we go to them. We take we see them once a week. Library services once a week. They're authorized to get based on their compliancy level. They can get 2 books and 1 magazine, and we see them every week. Now, when we see them,
there was an impressive array of books published in a range of regional languages. Even the Uyghurs, a minority Muslim group, were catered for, and the librarians seemed proud of their achievements.
Because it's awfully hot out there, and it's going to get hotter.
It's very hot. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
We've all been given bottles of water. This is our 2nd bottle of the day. It's and it is so hot. Well, that was the library. We know that Harry Potter's popular with the detainees. Our guide soon informed us that any material we filmed would be censored at the end of each day. What's more, we risked losing our footage entirely if we breached the media rules. The camps are split into so-called compliant and non-compliant holding quarters. Our first visit was to Camp 4, which we were told housed the most compliant and least dangerous men.
Here, and I can answer any questions for you as we go along as well. This is what we call is our open rec or central rec. All detainees are allowed to come out here every day, 2 hours a day. As you see, we have basketball here, we have soccer, we have volleyball, we have ping pong tables.
We're told that the detainees are allowed out for 2 hours recreation every day. There are some people from the International Red Cross who are talking to the detainees that we've seen so far, obviously addressing any concerns or raising issues with them. The International Red Cross is the only NGO allowed access. This is on the strict agreement, however, that nothing they witness can be made public.
When all detainees arrive here in Guantanamo, these are some of the items that they are issued. They have some eye coverage at night so they can sleep, and some ears. You see the toothbrush here that they're issued, and toothpaste, glasses. Also, some of the things you'll see is, they have a full roll of toilet paper here and full, vice some of the other camps where they're just issued some toilet paper. If a detainee tries to harm himself or hurt himself in any way, then he is immediately put into this. This is just a heavy material smock, and this is all he has on. Okay, and basically medical personnel evaluate him to make sure that he, is not going to, try to hurt himself anymore. So he is in this for at least 24 hours until we evaluate him.
In order to accomplish our mission, we have a staff of physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, physician's assistants, nurses, and hospital corpsmen, Navy hospital corpsmen. We have a well-stocked pharmacy. We have about 400 medications that we can draw from. Our corpsmen are on the blocks 4 to 5 times a day passing medications, so the detainee can get the attention of the corpsmen when they're out there passing medication.
The colonel in charge of this clinic was at pains to emphasise how well equipped it was.
Here at the detention hospital, we have an x-ray facility, so we can bring the detainees here and do x-rays of the chest, abdomen, extremities, and spine.
But the operation here is at the centre of international concern from the medical community. More than 400 doctors and senior physicians have already expressed their anxieties that the role of military doctors in Guantanamo directly contradicts the Hippocratic Oath. For instance, the staff here force-feed detainees on hunger strike, a practice which is banned elsewhere in the West because it is considered a direct violation of human rights.
I've actually done a full resuscitation here on a detainee. And so,
what was wrong with him?
That was the one detainee that we had that had cancer, and this was a bad time that he had prior to his demise.
Mm-hmm. Did he die in the hospital?
Yes. And we provided palliative care to him, and we provided chemotherapy for him. He had an oncologist that treated him, and then at the time of the end of his death, we tried to follow all the Islamic customs and traditions. We brought in an imam to be with him.
Would you have preferred him to have been sent home and die in the care of his family?
My preference is no relevance, ma'am.
Well, you're the doctor. I just wondered,
That's outside of my lane, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
We provided the best care we could for him, as I would have provided for anyone other, as a service member or even a family member. Mm-hmm. I try to do as well as for him as I did for any of those.
No one has been allowed to assess the detainees in Guantanamo independently, and he will say that the Red Cross are allowed, but of course the Red Cross aren't allowed to make any kind of public statements. And indeed, when the American Medical Association went and visited Guantanamo, they weren't allowed access to any of the prisoners being held there. So a lot of people have been to Guantanamo but have not actually seen a prisoner. So how can anyone make any informed decision when it's essentially a closed prison and people are not being allowed independent access? And that, I think, has got to be a major concern. And I don't think it's an issue just with Guantanamo, which in many ways is the most open of the secret prisons, but it's also the issue of medical treatment of prisoners being held in black sites elsewhere where they haven't got access to even the Red Cross.
Lydia Mohammed's made a confession under torture. Gordon Brown knows that.
Trafalgar Square, another rally, another protest, but this one is with a difference. George W. Bush is coming into town, and so everybody here today has gathered to give him the reception they feel that he deserves. We've got lots of orange around because a great part of this protest is going to be about Guantanamo Bay, and of course there is the lobby that is demanding the return of Binyam Mohammed. Binyam Mohammed, an Ethiopian refugee living here in London, has endured 6 years of illegal detention in the hands of the Americans. His lawyer, Clive Stafford Smith, has organised this demonstration to draw attention to the fact that his client was tortured into making a false confession to crimes he did not commit.
He was taken by the CIA to Morocco, where he was tortured, and he was tortured both with a razor blade to his genitals, and also he was then taken to the dark prison in Kabul, where he was tortured with music. And the point of this brief illustration is he was tortured with a song called Barney the Purple Dinosaur. Now, many of you will be familiar with the torturous tunes and tones of Barney the Purple Dinosaur. We're not going to perform Barney, we're going to perform a slight variation on that theme. Less than 5% of the prisoners in Guantanamo were ever on the battlefield of Afghanistan, let alone being arrested there. More than half of them were seized in Pakistan, not Afghanistan, and for bounties. And you know, the minimum bounty was $5,000. I've got copies of the bounty flyers, and $5,000, as you well know, in that part of Pakistan or Afghanistan is an enormous amount of money. To someone here in Britain, say, it would be the equivalent of about $250,000. And so obviously, when you do that sort of thing, you get what you pay for. You get a bunch of people just turning in Arabs of any sort. And it helps to explain why there were so many mistakes made in Guantanamo Bay and why so many of the prisoners are totally innocent. And I've been surprised myself by the huge proportion of the people I've represented there who had nothing to do with anything.
A hood was put over my head, handcuff was put over my hand, and I was basically rushed to a pickup truck and driven over to a field, which seemed as a field. I mean, I couldn't see anything, and a helicopter landed, and I could hear, basically it landed and Americans came off it, and they were talking to the Afghans, and I could hear $5,000 being mentioned. So that's how I know I was bought for $5,000.
We were told that we're leaving Kandahar, not knowing where we were going. Put onto a plane, heads covered, feet shackled together, hands shackled together, eyes and ears covered, so we didn't know what was going on. And it must have been about 24 hours later we arrived in the place. We didn't, for the first 2 weeks I didn't know where I was. Later I realised it was Guantanamo Bay, and we were kept in the most horrendous conditions in cages.
Good, we're ready.
All right, welcome to Camp 5.
Binyam Mohammed has been held here in Camp 5, the first of the 2 Supermax prisons in Guantanamo, erected by Halliburton at a cost of tens of millions to the US taxpayer.
Camp 5 is an adaptation of an existing facility in Terre Haute, Indiana. When Camp 5 was constructed, it came in on the barge in pieces, and we simply constructed the walls around it. This time, I'm going to take you onto the El Valor tier. It is an active tier, so that if you have questions, feel free to ask. However, again, I ask that you only photograph people from the chin down. Thank you.
As you can see, this maximum security wing looks spotless, but on entering we were enveloped by the unmistakable odour of human filth.
Okay, this is one of the interrogation rooms that I spoke of. During interrogation, the detainee would sit here in the blue and colored chair, and they would be hooked to the floor with a one-point restraint, as you can see here. The interrogation team and the linguist would sit in the black and colored chair. We provide them with a table because during the reservation, they do bring in food, drink, games, movies for the detainees. In the event of an emergency, that alarm would be pressed and a response force would arrive to the door.
Everybody knows who was in the camp. If you refuse to come to any interrogation, you'll be forced by 4 or 5 people. They'll come to your cell wearing certain way. They'll be wearing clothes, protection shields and so on. They'll come to your cell, beat you up and force you, chain you and force you to to the place where interrogation goes on, and they'll chain you down to the ground, and you're forced to attend the interrogation. You could ask any other prisoner and he will tell you the same.
From behind one cell door, we could hear muffled sounds and shouts of abuse from a Yemeni detainee. I'm not sure if the insults were meant for us or his guards.
We need to avoid interfering with the camp operation, so this is why we just go in and out before because they know you're here and don't know who you are. So it's really for fourth protection.
Unfazed, our po-faced tour guide continued with her delivery until David spotted something curious through a darkened window.
Feeding chair in there? Force feeding chair?
We don't do any force feeds at Camp 5.
Okay, what was the chair in there?
The chairs in there is just a restraint chair. We do no feedings at Camp 5.
Could I get a picture of it?
Picture of what?
The restraint chair.
No, I really
No?
The US prison system says it introduced the restraint chair as a way of preventing prisoners from harming themselves or others. We now know, however, that the chair and similar devices have been used during interrogations, and we also know that it's been used for unofficial punishment and even sadistic treatment and torture in US jails. These pictures show how one inmate was beaten around the head while strapped into the chair.
All detainees at Camp 5 are offered 2 hours of recreation daily. The cells that we're currently looking at are 10 by 20 inside. Inside of each pen there is a concrete step, which they refer to as the stair step. This is the medical room at Camp 5. In the medical room at Camp 5, this is where we do sick call procedures. We can give routine shots, any life-saving measures, whatever they need inside for their medical care here. If they do need any surgery or anything of that nature, dental procedures, we would transport them either to the Det Hospital or to Camp 6.
Well, it all looks extremely high-tech, and we can see, that the facilities are here.
For legal representation. As you notice, if you look up toward the ceiling, there are absolutely no cameras in this area. That is for confidentiality purposes only. The detainee would sit here on the right, and the lawyer team would sit here on the left.
Right, that was quite traumatic for me. I don't know if you heard it, but there was sound coming from one of the cells, and when someone's in distress, it regardless of who they are, it just really, I find it unsettling.
If you can pull that door shut just a little bit. Every time that someone comes to visit, you'll notice a lot of talking and a lot of chat. That's the norm. We were standing right behind here a while ago. They didn't know you were here. They were extremely quiet.
Is this the facility where the 3 men committed suicide?
I can't disclose that, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
So, but if you look behind you though, that's not a very large gap. And every time a guard walks up here, like I said, they're smart. They know that because of their culture, we're not allowed to touch their Quran or deface their religious items in any way. And if they want to disrupt, it's as simple. They're constantly evolving and constantly thinking the enemy, and they will put their Quran up here knowing that we can't shut that door now. They know that we can't shut that door because the Quran would fall on the ground and then we would be defacing their religious items. So then, now I have to make sure that I have 2 guards here standing on that because we can't close it, and then and now that disrupts all the operations, and that's what they're doing. They're constantly disrupting our operations. That's what they're trained to do. It's one of their tactics. So we have to do things to ensure that they can't disrupt our operations.
I have now been in Guantanamo Bay for 2 days with filmmaker David Miller. We might be one of the few media allowed inside the world's most notorious prison, but it is what the US military's PR doesn't want us to see that haunts my imagination. Their accounts so far have been quite different from the vivid recollections of ex-detainees.
I spent about 2 months of solitary confinement in Kandahar and Bagram, and I spent almost 2 years of solitary confinement in Guantanamo. It varies, and there are different types of solitary confinement. There's a punitive type of solitary confinement, and there is one that is designed to keep you away from everybody so that you don't communicate with them. I was in the latter, and not necessarily a punitive one. But nonetheless, it means that you're isolated from every person who may have any form of communication with you, of meaningful communication, other than a handful of decent guards. But since that happened, and since there were some guards who were communicating with detainees, some of them were removed for fraternization with the enemy, and eventually they installed cameras so that there really was nobody to speak to other than at meal times. And that was extremely difficult, particularly for people who'd been brought in quite new. In a sense, it helped to shape me afterwards, how I turned out, so that I now need more isolation than I ever used to before I was a free man. But its effects can actually literally send somebody crazy.
As you'll notice, the guards on the upper and lower levels, there's multiple guards getting face time on each individual detainee at a minimum of 3-minute intervals. These guards walk an average of about 14 miles a day touring in front of the cell doors, and up and down, and getting the detainees to and from specific locations. As you notice in the center of the tables, due to the operational security aspects of it, they are not allowed communal type living where they would be allowed to interact with one another. Everything in this facility is designed to prevent them from harming themselves or harming the guards. The mirror is stainless steel and it's permanently affixed to the wall, not with screws but with rivets. The toilet and sink is one piece mounted from the rear, permanently affixed to the ground. The sheet that they have is designed to prevent tearing and to prevent threads being pulled from it, so that it can't be utilized to build any type of rope or device that would harm a guard or themselves. They have a pin that's designed to prevent self-harm or to prevent harm to the guards. It's just a flexible, it's the insert out of a regular pin with a rubber sleeve over it. Even the towel rack is a breakaway towel rack, so that they try to suspend their weight from it. Okay? All of the guards are required to wear a ballistic vest as they roll around for their protection, so that they cannot be stabbed. Or if they are stabbed, that it will help prevent injury to them. The average age of our sailor and soldier that work in here is between 22 to 23 years of age, and they take an onslaught of different things every single day. So the level of professionalism that they show and to not retaliate when they have things such as fecal matter or urine thrown on them and things of that nature is astounding to me.
Are they trying to kill you, or are they trying to kill themselves? I'm just a wee bit confused here.
Ma'am, what it is their way, it's the way that they utilize their tactics. They adjust their tactics to draw attention to themselves. Now, if they could do that, ask yourself, if you could draw attention to something, either by harming yourself or having one of your brothers harm yourself, just to bring attention back to the camps. Whichever target of opportunity becomes available to draw attention to your cause, you're going to do it.
Ooh. I really need to gather my thoughts on this. Well, I have been in several different prisons throughout the world as an observer. I've been in American prisons, in California, top security prisons in Britain, and I have to say that was so depressing. And whether the prisoners were performing, as was suggested to me, I don't know, but I just saw several prisoners detainees in a highly agitated state, pacing up and down their tiny cells, clearly very, very distraught. Clearly, they looked as though they'd lost it mentally. They were just pacing manically up and down like a lion in a circus cage, and I found that particularly distressing. We weren't allowed to capture it on camera, but one of the prison guards told me that they were deliberately playing up because they knew that a media team was inside. And you heard the guy, you know, this is, he sees it very much as a battle of wills, almost like a war. And wow, I just feel thoroughly depressed having been in there.
Let's go. Come on.
I left Camp 6 feeling bewildered and despondent. It seemed that the overwhelming consequence of the US operations here was the total dehumanization of these captives, a clinical process which robbed them of their identities and nationalities. Regarding them as anonymous detainees might have made the guards' job easier, but for me it felt all the more sinister. Do you ever worry that you've got wholly innocent people locked up?
I know that there is a possibility. I mean, there's always a possibility. I have to do and sign off on an annual review of the case, of the background of every single one of these people. And I've been through all of these people once. And the information that I have been privy to leads me to believe that they all have some level of guilt associated or were participants in actions that were contrary to coalition and U.S. forces. So I'm pretty comfortable. Now, there have been several of those reviews where I have read and seen that either the intelligence value that those people have or that their level of compliance or whatever is such that they pose little further risk to the United States for them to be transferred back to their home countries or released outright. And I have so recommended that they be released or transferred. But of course, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Secretary England, is the official that makes that determination. I just provide a recommendation, along with many other entities.
The truth is, when this film was made, only one man had been convicted of any offence. That was Osama bin Laden's driver, Yemeni Salam Hamdan, who has now been returned to his country. What about the children who ended up in Guantanamo? I think they were mainly
minors.
Iguana camp.
Right.
Minors, children.
Very quickly were determined to be minors and were repatriated very, very quickly. They were here just a few months and they were sent back immediately.
A few months can be a very long time for a child.
Exactly.
How did they get swept up in this battlefield?
Well, you know, the battlefield that most people have in their minds is one that's terrain like, you know, hills and valleys and fighting holes and that kind of thing. Keep in mind that the war that we're involved with now, the global war on terror that Al-Qaeda has, we've been waging with Al-Qaeda, is not about terrain. This is the fourth generation of warfare. This is a warfare that occurs across economic boundaries, political boundaries. It's everywhere. The specific reasons why those miners were captured, I don't know. I really don't know.
I lost my eyes. I lost my feet, everything.
No, you still have your eyes, and your feet are still at the end of your legs.
Since we left Guantanamo, video footage has emerged of a weeping Omar Khadr in a session with intelligence officers. Omar was just 15 when he was detained in Afghanistan.
I remember Omar Khadr very well because he was brought into custody when I was held in the Bagram detention facility, and Omar was brought in terribly wounded. He'd had huge chunks of his shoulder and his chest blown out from what I've now discovered were point-blank shotgun blasts in his back during what was said to be a firefight. He'd also lost his sight in one of his eyes, become blind, and he'd had some of this, an operation that they'd obviously carried out on him to take out some shrapnel, which looked as if he'd had an autopsy performed upon him while he was still alive. So he was terribly emaciated, very weak, and to add to it, every American soldier that came along would shout at him, swear at him, scream at him, and pick him out because it was said that he'd caused the death of an American soldier, which still hasn't been established at all. And this young teenager, this boy, was treated worse than most people were there, worse than hardened Taliban leaders and so forth. I've seen Omar Khadr cry before, and he had had heard of many things that happened. He'd heard about his brother being captured and wounded. He heard about the death of his father in custody. He'd heard about his whole family being torn apart completely to pieces. Then on top of that, this young child has to deal with the reality of torture, of watching people being beaten to death in Bagram, hearing the screams of people, and being screamed at himself, being accused of all sorts of crimes, and being told that he's going to be facing execution also. All of that, for any grown, hardened man, is hard enough to take, but for a 15-year-old boy, it's unbelievable.
We're in OPSEC, which is Operational Security. We're going through the extremely painful process of submitting our work to the censors. This is all based on security and privacy of the detainees. They're the reasons that we're given for this extraordinary amount of censorship, which, as you can hear from the protests going on at the moment, is quite alien to most Western journalists.
So tell me what's going on here.
I am being censored, essentially. The military has censorship. They don't want certain things for security purposes to go on TV. What I'm eliminating now are any cameras. They don't want the bad guys to know where the cameras are. And I'm not going to show, there aren't any in this shot right now. It's very time consuming. Nobody told me there were cameras in this room and I wasn't looking for them. That's why I got nailed in this particular area. But for the most part, yeah, it is frustrating. I've never experienced this level of security, but I've never been in this situation. So all I can do is do the best job I can to communicate the story.
We have an award-winning Israeli photographer acting for the Newsweek magazine who has been devastated by having much of his work wiped. He told me that coming from Israel, a country which is very aware of security issues, even he was astounded by the level and scrutiny that his work went through. And we're just being called over now, and it's our go.
They must be found, they will be stopped, and they will be punished. The Separate is part of a worldwide assault on terror. All our allies and friends will now be familiar with these evildoers and their associates.
With our time here drawing to a close, we were taken to the site where it all began. In January 2002, shortly after America's invasion of Afghanistan, the first detainees arrived in Guantanamo. An area of barren swampland was converted into the first holding and interrogation sites, using old cages which were previously designed to hold illegal immigrants. Camp X-Ray is now abandoned and overgrown. It nestles quietly several miles from the main base area.
This is Camp X-Ray behind me. It was named for its grid coordinates. It was only open for approximately 4 months in 2002. It was open from mid-January to mid-April 2002. And at the time that it was being used, it only housed about 300 detainees. This front part here is the main sally port or front gate to the camp.
The early news images of those primitive quarters would come to symbolise George W. Bush's newly launched war on terror. This was a new, uncompromising and unprecedented strategy that would soon have many critics around the world asking tough questions about ethics and legality.
Why is it you use the word cage? Do you like inflammatory words? You think it's good to do that, stir up people and make people think they're animals? I think it's improper to use that word.
I remember Donald Rumsfeld going mad when the media described this as a cage. And he said these aren't cages, but to me, do they not look like a cage to you?
Well, I guess in his perception it wasn't a cage. So.
This is what home was like in Camp X-Ray for MOAZZAM BEGG, Martin Mbanga, TAREK DERGOUL, the TIPTON 3, and this is it. It's a cage. There's no other. It's a cage. No washing facilities. Slopping out was in procedure. There's a shower block further down. Obviously, it wasn't like this. This is nature's paintbrush, which in some ways has probably made the picture look better than the actual reality when Camp X-Ray was operational in those early days. One can only guess what was going through the minds of people like MOAZZAM BEGG.
I can confirm for you that we had 34 detainees arrive here at Guantanamo Bay today. That brings our total population up to 254 detainees in Camp X-Ray.
When I was taken out of Kandahar to Guantanamo Bay, upon seeing the cages, my first impression was that this was quarantine, like dogs from abroad are before they're brought into a country. They're put in quarantine for a period of time before they're let into America. So I thought to myself, stupidly, that I was going to be allowed in America, and my only thought was that I would be given more food, because they starved me in Kandahar, and in X-ray I was below average weight. I was very below weight.
They looked like ordinary rooms, but from the stories that we've heard and from the declassified material that we've seen, some pretty unpleasant things apparently happened in here. This is where the detainee would sit, presumably cuffed, and so you're sitting here, you've got all the guards surrounded there, your interrogators there, guards sitting there, guards sitting there. It must have been pretty terrifying.
The shackles it depends on how they would put them on, and if they were malicious, they'll put them on tight. I think on several occasions I remember that I would have to limp while walking, hip-hop style. It reminded me of the hip-hop style, and the shackles would actually eat into into my ankles, and then they would actually bleed. But it was best not to let the guards know, because you don't want to show them any sign of weakness.
There was a table in front of us which was like fixed to the floor. The chair that we actually sat in, you couldn't move it, it must have been screwed to the floor. And the first time I went in there was about 14, 15 people in there when I was interrogated. I felt scared because I've been taken to interrogation before, and the maximum amount of people that had been there was about 3. And going into this room, there was like 15 people there, and I didn't have a clue who any of them were. 3 of them from British intelligence who were actually sitting on the table in front of me.
I'm getting flashbacks of my interrogation in Afghanistan, and it was in quite a different atmosphere, although I've got no doubt, I was terrified, absolutely terrified, but my questions were done over a cup of tea, chai, and it's the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen next, not being in control of your own life, being in captivity, and that is terrifying for anybody, whether they've done anything or not. I don't know whether the detainees here are guilty of anything. I entered the country illegally in Afghanistan and got caught for it, but I was released on humanitarian grounds. But it brings it all back. But this is really oppressive, and the rain isn't helping.
When we do media tours, we want people to come and see Camp X-Ray, so you can see that things are different now. So this is how they used to be, but they're different now. So as we toured the camps yesterday, you can see how a lot of things have changed.
We're heading back now. The time in Guantanamo is over, and it's quite ironic, but this is the first opportunity we've actually had to film any sea. Even though we've been on an island, everything has been restricted, and we're nearly out of the grip of our senses now, so that feels quite good. But it'll be quite good to get back home as well. I feel as though I've really stepped out of my comfort zone here, and I'm looking forward to get back to London. In the 7 years the Bush administration has run Guantanamo, the damning evidence has stacked up. Barack Obama has pledged to close Guantanamo as soon as possible. And even George W. Bush concluded 2 years ago it should be closed down. But the damage has been done. And what of the thousands of men still locked up, not just in Guantanamo, but thousands of others held in secret detention facilities under US control around the world? The extent of the harm done to the West's reputation in the Islamic world is hard to judge, and for me at least, this is the most worrying thing of all. Will the Muslim world ever trust America again? From the start, Guantanamo seemed to represent all that was wrong with the uncompromisingly aggressive reaction to 9/11. I suspect that it will take much more than a new face in the White House to recover all that has been lost.